Ba 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 da ba. Pew. You know the frame rate theme. You love it.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you know that another frame rate has begun. I'm your host, Michael Swaim, and with me is another one of those.
I'm Abe. It's Abe. It's Abe.
It's Abe, a classic part of the frame rate theme. And, of course, delivering the climactic third part of the frame rate theme you all know and love is our special guest.
Blah, blah, boom, boom, boom.
It's a game changer.
I am Cody Johnston.
I feel like I'm home now. Doesn't that just, it's Pavlovian. You know it's frame rate when you hear
all three
that,
parts.
All three parts
yeah.
of that sequence of sounds. This is a very special episode because it's part of our Pick the Flick tier, which is a great way you can support the beans, whereby patrons of a certain level get to choose what we cover on frame rate, although we reserve the right to tell you your opinion's bad and not cover it and give you your money back. In this case, we didn't do that because Shawclaw, user Shawclaw, hi Shawclaw, Shannon's the first name. I won't say the surname, just in case. But we want to thank Shawclaw for bringing us and thereby you the film Brazil, which I hadn't watched in many, many years. And I'm truly, sincerely grateful for rewatching it, for having a reason to rewatch it. So we are talking Brazil. Shawclaw, it should be noted, purchased this specifically as a Christmas present for her husband Jesse. So hi Jesse, and I'm sorry it took so long.
We're so sorry.
It's early.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
right.
That's true. She
But
didn't
we,
specify.
We got Cody, and I wanted to. Here's the thing: is that I was watching Brazil, apropos of nothing, and I was like, who should we have guest on this frame rate? And I was like, you know what? It would be great. Something I could do for my friend Cody is to find a feature film that is because you're the star of the Some More News. You talk a lot of politics. That's your bag right now, Cody.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And I was like, you know what? It would be very good if we could give him a break from that and pick a movie that probably has no relevance whatsoever in today's world, and just in general give you a good, happy time to talk with your buds.
Yeah, just wild and crazy shit.
Yeah,
you know?
that just means nothing, you know?
Escapism.
Yeah, so that's why Cody's here.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I don't like, sometimes you want to take a break from thinking about society. So you put on Brazil.
Well, and to peel back one more layer of madness, I'll have you know, we've already recorded a Brazil episode of Frame Rate some time ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But in fact, it was lost due to a crazy technical error. So it's very appropriate to today's topic.
Yeah.
But
a bug got into the computer.
Oh, yeah. Bug in the system. All right.
Exactly. Cody, what's your experience with Brazil, your history with Brazil? And in case someone hasn't seen it, we usually leave it to the guest to just say, like, in a few sentences, Brazil is this theme or this setting or whatever, you know?
Oh, yeah. I hadn't watched it in a long, long time. I like Gilliams movies in general, and all of his Python work, obviously. But it had been maybe a decade since I've seen this movie. And so watching this again, you remember things that maybe didn't have as much of a message to you at the time you originally watched it, or didn't hit quite as hard. So this viewing experience was quite something, to be reminded of everything about it. I would say that Brazil is about the inefficiencies of society and how they are there by design in order to shield people in power from consequences and accountability. And sometimes the best way to subvert the system is through empathy. But then also, like, I don't know, like, there's like sci-fi stuff and pews and things like that, you know?
All right, I'll give the Leonard Maltin bullshit synopsis for people who legitimately haven't seen it.
Oh, just like the plot. Sure.
Yeah. It's along the lines of 1984, Brave New World, and it's a dystopian society, or The Trial by Kafka, or what have you, where a protagonist navigates this horrible society, and we hope they'll break out of it, and you think they do, but then they don't, which is the same as 1984 or Brave New World or any of those.
Any of those things.
Yeah, it's in the long tradition of sci-fi social commentary that's not going to end well. Of course, depending on which cut you watch, because another famous thing about Brazil that film buffs will know is that it was deemed too depressing when the executives saw screenings of it, which honestly, I don't understand how you don't get that. If you just watched a movie and you feel profoundly despondent, that means the movie was really fucking good. It's hard to make you feel that way.
Knowing that they changed it, because they didn't even technically really change it. They just cut the last scene.
They literally imply that the dream is reality.
Right. Like, and I imagine watching the movie and seeing that ending and actually being mad. Like the reaction of like, it's not uplifting, you got to change it, is weird. Because if I watched the fake ending, I would be mad that the movie was wrong and like did a bad job.
Yeah. Oh, also, can you imagine a more fitting, like, cosmic commentary than for this movie, Brazil, to be like, that contains the Ministry of Information who only provide disinformation and all this 1984 style shit, for the powers that be, the nebulous bureaucracy, to say, this movie, Brazil itself, is too downery. We're going to change the ending to pretend that the dream is reality. And you're like, that's what the movie's about. It's happening again to the movie.
Maybe it was actually very clever on their part.
But if it's clever, like if they know that's what they're doing, then they're just like, yes, I am the devil.
Right.
Yeah.
Suck my dick.
It's amazing how much, because he wrote a book about it, Gilliam did. And it's called The Love Conquers All, is like what they call it version, the studio version. Mm-hmm. And it's not like blown out of proportion, because it was a very big deal for a while. It's a pretty famous case because the studio relented, which is very rare. But it only was shown, that version of the movie you can't really find. If you do have it, you're very lucky, because it was only like played on TV and probably a handful of movie theaters. That's all it played in. They kept holding it back. They were working on this edit. They kept not releasing the film, and basically Terry Gilliam stole the film. And they were like, okay, you can't show it on this. You can't do it at a screening at a film school. And he's like, yeah, you got it. And then he showed it at the film school for like a whole week. And then he showed it at a bunch of like theaters. And that got a bunch of critics to get buzz around the movie, that people were starting to say things like Oscars. And then after that, and then he actually, Gilliam, my favorite thing, it's next to... what was it, for Mononoke, sent to Weinstein, which is like, ooh, now, but like Miyazaki sent a thing, essentially a postage to Weinstein that was a samurai sword, and he's after he'd purchased the film's rights from Studio Ghibli, he was like, all it had is one little note card that said no cuts. And it's just like one of those famous things that Gilliam did, which is that he took out a full spread, which cost him like $1,500 at the time, which is still quite a bit. And he made it look like a funeral invitation, and it said, "Dear Sid Sheinberg," was the producer who was giving the most pushback. "When are you going to release my film? Signed, Terry Gilliam." So this is like crazy. Like, it had a lot of buzz because it was something that came out of this tradition, I guess, of like the auteurs fighting for their movies. And so it's actually more of a story about the rebellious, like, rebellion wins. There's a success to rebellions that we like. And we wanted that with it didn't happen in the movie, but we wanted that in like the story around the
Our
movie, which is why
reality,
Right.
sure.
it became like a bigger deal. I just think that that's kind of interesting. Is that
Well,
like as you said, you were like the studio is representing the bureaucracy that is the problem.
That's true. Right. So actually, the story's kind of a happy. We're in reality, we're pleased with the version that made it out.
Yes.
And I agree. It's by
Right.
far
The
superior
movie.
version.
The movie doesn't have a happy ending, but the movie
The fact that
experience
it got
does.
out is
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hesitate to say this in these times, but I'm like, it speaks well of our democracy, I suppose, that you're allowed to be critical of it, and it still makes its way out into the world as an artistic statement. But I just want to say that, like, it must be said that Terry Gilliam in his old age has become like a crotchety old man who says crazy problematic shit. And I don't always truck with like his current sensibilities, but I can see why he felt the need to fight for this film at all costs, because my main takeaway after watching this movie, after not having seen it for decades and just thinking, it is a good film. Yeah, it's a very good film. I liked it, get off my
Yeah.
back.
Right.
But like really watching it for this podcast, I'm like, oh, it's easily in my top 5 films of all time.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
that's something I think about a lot, and it's very rare for it to change. And this just went from a film I know I admire and I saw it back in the day to maybe number 2 or 3 films of all time. Brazil fucking rules.
Yeah.
you guys. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good. From start to finish, it's so good in every way. Like,
In every possible way.
It's in a and for me, I want to just echo that. It's one of the films that made me decide to go to film school. It's in a handful.
wow.
It was that important to me. It was the first time that I sat and watched a movie alone, just in a room, like watching the DVD, and I couldn't go to bed. Like after it, and it's like 3 hours. Almost.
yeah, right. It was supposed to be so much shorter.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, you keep thinking about it. It's there's so many images and ideas that get stuck in your brain.
What is the most? Let me ask you this, Cody. What's the most valuable? Like, what do you think is the most valuable lesson or question that this movie poses? Or maybe if you can't think of just one, like name some of them that really resonated with you when you rewatched it. Because you mentioned that you're like, when I watched it originally and I was like, yeah, a good movie, but then like it resonated with you in new ways after the rewatching. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, for sure. There's so much to it. I think the empathy thing, was a really is a really strong contender. Just the basic journey of you see, and this kind of ties in with the other thing that really stuck with me is the normalization of the terrorist attacks and things like that going on in the background.
Right.
And they happen more and more, and you get more and more used to them, and so eventually you're out to dinner and there's explosions and corpses behind you, and you just keep talking about your banal, like, pointless life.
Well, the
and
waiters
your
put screens up, you see.
Yeah, eventually they put screens up, so you can ignore it. So there's like these processes in place to help that along too. And then, experience a movie, and then eventually a similar thing happens, and the character's reaction is fundamentally different. And that is one of the cooler things of the movie to me.
Yeah, I love that. I love him at the beginning and him at the end, like just taking those sequences and just putting them next to each other. It really is one of those movies where, kind of like in Catch-22 with Yossarian, like it's all of a cerebral development for the main character, and it isn't done in it's not a typical hero's journey where it's just like, you know what, I've been oppressed in this way my whole life. That's Act 1. I'm going to make a stand. Beginning Act 2. It is very much a slow burn as he slowly realizes how fucked up it is. And he, is basically going the horror until he realized he must do something. And even then, I love how Kim Greist's character, when they're driving away, she's
Jill.
like, yeah, Jill. Well, she's like, you're like a little boy, because he's like, yeah, and then we're gonna go keep driving, woo, because he's like flirting with it. She's like, man, I grew up in the terrorism. Like, you're just here right now. That's all that is. And
Well,
you
it's
don't
the
need
thrill of becoming a revolutionary.
Exactly. And I
wears
thought
off, yeah.
that was well tempered too, because like there's a lot of things happening right now and it happened in 2016 that are just like a lot of people love a rebellion story. They love to be the rebels versus the empire, and
that's very true. And I see the negative manifestations of that we're having in America right now. But I also would say, like, I think the movie kind of goes out of its way to show that he is, and maybe this is your point, so forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but like, he's part of the problem, right?
I would say so. Yeah.
The fullness of the film is like him realizing everything's fucked up. And this is really cynical and grim, but I really think it's what the message is. And then dabbling with the idea of how can this be changed, and realizing, oh, it's too late. It can't be changed. I lose.
Right.
It's too far
the only thing you
gone
can
already.
do is escape into your mind.
Right.
And in fact, the whole of my life up until this point, I was a cog in the machine helping normalize it. Dang. I wish I had noticed that sooner.
Right, now I'm
Right.
I'm still stuck in the machine and can't do anything.
Because I
about
also
it,
felt like maybe again, maybe I'm misreading. And I do think, to the listener, this is a movie that absolutely, of course, deserves to be watched, but I don't think we'll be like encapsulating the plot per se, because it's so fucking dense and there's so much of it, and there's just so much to talk about what it means. So I recommend you pause the episode and go watch it and come back.
Yeah,
But
watch the Criterion
it's very
version
good.
too. If you have
Yeah.
someone who has the Criterion version, it's not that it's better, it's just really well taken care of. They really it's like a labor of love, clearly, by the Criterion collection on this one, and there's a lot of really good behind the scenes stuff that we also won't be talking about in this episode.
Yes, true. But I just wanted to ask you guys, I got the impression that the terrorist attacks are false flag attacks by the government.
I think some of them
Am
are.
I the only one who thinks that?
No,
Okay.
I think
No, I think the first scene kind of points to that, especially.
Yeah.
That was another thing that it hits you right away when you hear like a politician talking about these terror attacks. It gives that sense that like this is another piece of the theater that they're playing.
Okay. I'm sorry, but before I move on, by the way, the fucking first shot of this, well, not counting the credits with the swooping through the clouds and the song, which is amazing, but that shot that's the push in onto the store window,
Ooh, yeah.
where there's a set of TVs and they're playing an ad about Central Services' new ducts. And then you pull out and you see a silhouette of a woman with a baby carriage walk by. And then the store explodes. And then the explosion becomes the title card. And reflected on the shards of glass as they explode is the neon lighting from the city. It's like, I have rarely seen an opening shot that layers so many film techniques into one shot. It's like Pinocchio walking onto that island of bad children or whatever. You're just like immediately intoxicated with the sheer level of filmmaking we're about to see, and it stays at that level the whole fucking time.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I rewound
rigorous.
it.
Yeah.
To watch that again. Like
In
immediately.
terms of sheer imagery, like it reminds me of Hudsucker Proxy, Fifth Element, movies that I remember because of the way they look.
Yes,
It
he's
is
so good at
delightful.
framing shots and arranging people and choreographing things and having people say things in a certain way where it's like, I know everything you mean right now by this.
Yeah.
Oh, Maggie.
I was gonna say, can you hear my dog?
Yeah, it's cute.
Hi,
Keep it
Maggie.
in.
She's very
City
brave.
of Lost Children, Delicatessen is in Dark City also, I would say, right?
Dark
Or do
City,
you-
absolutely. I
Batman.
haven't
Sorry,
seen...
hold on. I'm sorry. I got it.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
While he does that, I have a question for Abe. City of Lost Children. Do I need to jump on that real quick? Because I've always been like intrigued by it, but I've never seen it.
I would say it definitely needs a single watch. I think
Okay.
Perlman's really good in it, playing a role that I don't think, like, cause he plays like, he's in a, like, I don't. there's a lot of people that you don't know in the movie, so that will probably distract you because there's a lot of just people who are, from it's a foreign country film. But it is a sci-fi fantasy, and it's got a lot of cool interpretations. I think that's the one in film school that I had a lot of fun with. It's like, it's definitely like we're talking about it through steampunk and like how he essentially Terry Gilliam is credited with Brazil in creating the steampunk genre to a lot of people. Some people predate it with other with manga and comics and stuff, but he popularized
Dark
it
Materials
in 85.
predates it as a book.
Yeah, I think so. It's not that it didn't exist. He didn't invent it.
Yeah.
He just he made it mainstream.
Sure.
And City of Lost Children is also given that credit because there was definitely 85 and 95, 10-year difference. And 95 is when it started kicking into gear. I think that's also slowly over time, we got the advent of the internet. And so a lot of cultures got developed like those kind of genres where that people are like, oh, you like that look? Oh, you like that look? So now it's in the zeitgeist a little bit more present. Where it was a little more behind the scenes and people wouldn't talk about it because it wasn't mainstream.
It's an aspect of globalized postmodernism that you see all the genres that have ever existed as just a palette of things to mash up. And we see that in film right now all the time.
I think Brazil is more well known because it's like, hey, here's the director who had just recently split from Monty Python.
That's crazy to think about.
Michael Palin is in this,
Right.
Jonathan Pryce became an actor of, well known. It was made in Britain, which is like the kind of. They also gave us Hitchhiker's Guide and stuff. They're like.
And 1984 and
British literature at this point is like, you don't look anywhere else if you want to really open up the bureaucracy,
If you really want
analog.
a dystopia story,
Yeah, if you want to read about how
1984.
paperwork is bad.
Yeah, exactly. You got one-stop shop.
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah. And so I think that there's a lot of not to try to move back to Brazil. The reason I mentioned it is because it very much so popularized along with Brazil, which I think is almost more important, the steampunk genres in the zeitgeist of, I don't know, video games. Now we have BioShock and all that stuff.
City of Lost Children, you mean? But let's get back to Brazil.
Yeah.
So, let's see where to dive in.
Where to
It's
dive in?
It's so good.
Yeah. So
and
you
just
mentioned
to
the
speak
density of tactics that is in his employ. That's something that I didn't want to talk at length about, but it's just something that I love about Gilliam's toolbox is that he loves to use. You can tell he's defining his toolbox by limitations. That, for example, you can feel it's Baron Munchausen or Brazil has he shoots a lot of wide-angle lenses, which means that his backgrounds have a lot more space than his foregrounds. It also means faces are a little bit distorted relative to other shots. But what it does is it forces his hand to things like choreography, things like pacing and timing need to be a little bit more picture perfect because you see so much in frame. So it has to
and a lot of the shots are even longer. He does a lot of moves that take all that into account.
So because he limits himself in some things where he's I want to do it this way, it means that he has to be very precise with the editing and the pacing and the choreography of all the moments. And that's what gives it that feeling. It's also, I think, what gives, we're talking about the Coen brothers in terms of, you mentioned Hudsucker Proxy, Michael. I think that there is some choreography in those types of shots that is not necessarily Coen Brothers' bag, but it's definitely Terry Gilliam's bag.
Yes, I mean, going down that hallway, all the male folk and the papers flying everywhere. There's so many shots like that. Even his new job, that hallway of where he is trying to talk to his new boss, and there's everyone handing him stuff, and they get him to his office like that. He's so good at that.
Yeah, and I think one of the visual bits that most people come away from the film having it as one of their favorites is his desk mate, Mr. Lime.
Yeah.
Where they share a desk through the wall.
Oh,
and they
God,
each get
so
half a desk. and they fight over like pulling the desk into their side of the office.
Which is
Are you suggesting that things are designed to make us sort of fight each other?
To be pit against each other, yeah.
Despite each other not being the actual enemy? Is that what you're saying?
It's also
so good. God.
Yeah, it's also awesome to see this movie and think about it critically the year Parasite came out. Awesome, by which I mean depressing, or like...
It made me think of Parasite too, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, it's still just as relevant to say these things? That sucks.
That's a problem. One could say.
It's a problem.
We haven't really fixed it. Like, you can still resonate just as hard saying, capitalism in the end is just a trap that takes us away from a healthy society. And you're like, I know. We said that 30 years ago. We haven't fixed that? Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
We all know.
Oh, yeah, we all know. The
My
Wire
lands.
is about the same shit, dude. Yeah, we know. Or, like, some of us know. But
Yeah, some of us know, and we like the movies about it.
yeah, but it was really, I got a lot out of it having just seen Parasite recently. And also having just covered The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover recently on this podcast stream, because although I enjoyed certain aspects of that film, and no one can deny Greenway's ability to like hammer you with a visceral image, it felt like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, preferred this. Yeah.
I prefer this. I prefer the clarity of the symbols used here.
Right.
I prefer the way that it all maps out geometrically very cleanly, and I know exactly what he means. And he means like 12 pretty complex things about socioeconomics, and yet they're all transmitted to me very clearly. That's quite a feat, and I just tip my hat to him, especially in the light of this movie we watched where I'm like, was that the point? I mean, he choked to death on a book about the French Revolution. That must be the point, right?
Oh, God.
But this other thing seems to be the opposite point. Like, Brazil is fucking clear.
It's very
Yes,
clear,
it's so
and I
clear.
think that that's very apt. I had the same exact thought, Michael, because I was like trying to be like, yeah, but when you do say it outright and you just say things like, Robert De Niro in Brazil, he works on pipes, which, that makes sense because it's all about he's fixing things that are systemically a problem because of distribution. Oh, I see. When you say it like
you always see the ducks
spelled
like
out,
pressing down from the ceiling. Yeah.
you
spell
go
it
like,
out.
well, that's too simple. But it's like, yeah, but then watch how they navigate the space, and there's always a new thing to jump onto. And in the end, it's doesn't forsake story for symbology. And that's what I think the important difference is. We're going to the movies to watch a story, not a lesson on like, the French Revolution.
Right.
So
Right,
I think
like,
that's
it
what makes Brazil more effective of a movie. Hence also why it's more popular. And I
Right,
think,
and it doesn't like hit you over the head with it, and I think to this aspect of this movie specifically, but Terry Gilliam in general, he came from animation. He did mostly animation for Monty Python, so he is really good at like coming up with that sort of symbology that you want. Like, okay, this image tells you this about society, and it's just this image because I do cartoons, and you have to pack it in, and he is just really good at transferring that to film. And utilizing it.
Yeah.
Like the ducks and everything. Like, yeah, there's all the stuff about how, yeah, they're built in. It's too complicated, and you. But then also throughout the movie, they're hanging from the ceiling, and it's not hitting over the head. It's just like hovering over your head.
Yeah.
And so you don't even notice them right away, and then you're like, wait, what are those? Oh, it's the ducks from the. Okay, that means that, and it's all pieced together. Very expertly.
Or it's like it took me many days after the viewing to realize, or to come to the theory that I think is true and I like, is that the desk gift that they give every employee of the Ministry of Information, that's a magnetic decision-making tree, and it can either point to yes or no. Every time you ever see it function, it only points to no.
Yep.
Right.
So you realize, oh, it's rigged. It's like loaded
no
dice.
machine.
It always goes to no. And then you have the thought, oh, it wasn't just a joke that they all get the same desk gift. It's a training mechanism from the higher ups. It's to condition you to say no more often than yes. And everything in this movie kind of unfolds in that way where it's like, Like, I think towards the end of the film when Robert De Niro gets literally devoured by newspapers, which honestly made me think of the villain dying in We're Back, where like crows eat them.
That's
But like that was the first moment where I was like, okay, the imagery has jumped the shark, or like the imagery is super on the nose now. He's
Right,
getting
right.
eaten alive by paperwork.
funny. Yeah.
And yet in that case, that's literally the exact moment that the director wants you to start realizing, yeah, this is a dream. And so it just shows such a sure hand in a way that, I'll be honest, I find Gilliam uneven. And I think I love Baron von Munchausen very much, but there's his most recent films like the Dr. Parnassus and etc. I feel like he just sort of blankets everything with cool imagery. And Brazil is still at a phase in her career where Cody's right, like he's navigating what is filmmaking, how can I use my animation sensibility to inform the filmmaking, and it shows a kind of like control that I think
there's a restraint to it that is
he's
a slow
completely
burn if you
lost
watch it,
at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that is very well said. I think that is the best time in an artist's life when they're still figuring out the apparatus, but they have the curiosity still and the zest for the job that they, want to fuck with it in a way that they feel is uniquely their own. Why? For the sake of it. I think that's, why you get directors who are maybe auteurs who are fantastic getting older or getting, turning corporate and their work isn't as good. It's not that the brain isn't there. It's just that their passion led them down a different path. I think this is key. Like, this is the height of Terry Gilliam's passion for him, like him making his voice said. I think that's one of the reasons
there's
for
a
the
care
breakup
and a
with Monty
passion for
Python.
it. Right. Having that control and taking time and care with it, and making sure that everything is in its right place, as opposed to just like kind of autopilot. Not to discredit like his later films, but you do get a sense of care and passion from it. Even even Michael, what you were talking about with the magnetic, the gifts and stuff, just like having that in it as well, because like juxtaposing the bug in the system early on with like, this isn't a bug, this is a feature of it. Like,
right.
He's got both. It's so he's good.
Every joke in Brazil is profound as shit. Like, there are constantly these, like, I know Abe and I agree one of the funniest things is the image of the secretary outside Michael Palin's office.
Oh my God, the
So
stenographer.
fucking funny. Yeah, she has to keep a record of everything that's said in the torture sessions in case someone confesses like a state secret. But behind the scenes, there are no state secrets. The terrorists are fake. There's no this is all bullshit.
Right.
So all she does is like literally with a smile on her face type out, "Ooh, ah, no, please don't kill me. Oh God. Oh, shriek, shriek." Various shrieks. Shrieking continues and shit like that. And that is so fucking funny. And yet, I mean, it's the definition of satire, I guess, because you laugh and laugh, and then the laugh wears off, and you go like, it has some kind of air of importance, though, this story. I guess I'll think about it for a second. Oh, shit. She's passively taking the normalized violence of the state upon the people and transcribing it and shifting her own guilt away because she's just a cog in the machine. Like, every single joke also works as a fully realized political treatise, which is really hard to write. That's hard to pull off.
It's so impressive, and to play them all out in a natural way. It doesn't seem like it's out of place. It's not telling you what's going on. It's so elegant and fitting for like it's the same department. The Jack character, the Michael Palin, everything he says is that, like, him getting mad at Lowry at the end for having to torture him.
Oh my God!
The one comment he makes, the one comment he makes in one of their first scenes together when he's playing with his kid and they're talking about how he accidentally killed that guy, and I forget the exact line, but it's something about how like, well, no, I was right. about the man. They brought me the wrong man. I was right to do it to the man. They were wrong for giving me the wrong man, or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh yeah, this is how it is, and it was wrong, and because of this inefficiency, like I'm just doing my job.
And yet, if everyone can say that, how will we ever fix the problem? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you need a bunch of Robert De Niro's coming and save the day.
And it's incidentally important, I think, that Robert De Niro is literally like a wanted. He's the only real terrorist we see who's like wanted and will be executed on sight just for fixing people's air conditioner and heating systems. Because at the point that your society becomes this insane, the most basic thing you do is treasonous. Like,
right.
He just wants people's systems to work. And that's
a little, a little better, a little less bloated, for them, for the individual,
and without filling out paperwork. And you just can't get away with that in this society. What I wanted to sort of meditate on, just because Cody mentioned it, and I think it's my favorite moment in the film, and I also want to tie it to, we covered a little movie called Bone Tomahawk on this podcast. Bone Tomahawk, you guys. Bone Tomahawk. And the point was made that has really stuck with me, that movies like Saw and Hostel that try to make you feel bad because horrible shit is happening forget that the reason it really hits home is that there's empathy in the room, is that there's someone saying, I wish this wasn't happening. I'm horrified. I love you. I can't believe you're having to withstand this. Oh, no.
Yeah, just a shot of that person.
Yeah. And Bone Tomahawk does that, and it wrecks you. And I think in the same way, it's so easy for things about dystopia and bureaucracy to become fully isolated. Kafka's fully isolated. Like, I've read a lot of Kafka, and I enjoy it. But it's purely an intellectual exercise. Like, you can't root for the guy in Metamorphosis. He exists only as a symbol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the most important moment in Brazil to me is the moment when Michael Palin in the baby mask, which is one of the most horrifying images I've ever seen put to film, stops and looks back at camera and then turns and continues on the plank and goes and tortures his friend. And you only realize in retrospect that it's Michael Palin. So only after the fact can you appreciate that he looked back, because underneath this crazy mask that society's put on him of a torturer that doesn't care and just smiles as they torture you, he noticed that it was his friend and he was upset.
Yeah.
The system that isolates us cannot inoculate us from the terror of actually having human hearts. And like the facts, like that's just fucking heartbreaking to me.
That's great. I never thought about it that way.
Michael Palin has to tell him, how could you do this to me?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what they both need to do is break free of the society, but in absence of that, it's an unthinkable nightmare. Like,
right.
I'm tearing up talking about it. This hits home to me so hard.
You know what's so amazing is that, like, it's such a dense image, in my opinion, that what you just said resonates with me, and I never thought about it in those terms. But of course, the impact of the shot is the same. I always interpreted his look back at camera as a break the fourth wall. Anyone can be under this mask. You can be under this mask.
Oh, like funny games?
Kind of, yeah. Like, just the idea that he's breaking the fourth wall there is a nod to, this is not a movie, which is a nod to anyone here could torture without empathy.
Because the machine is the same for everybody, despite the role that you play.
If you allow the system to say you don't need empathy, then you can do that. You're capable of this. And it's the same message either way. Sorry, I just wanted to point out that it was different for me, but it all leads to the same place.
Yeah, I get a lot out of imagining it that it's Michael Palin realizing after 12 years of numbness that he actually is upset for 1 second.
He's still got it,
And then he stuffs it down.
Right. That is horrifying.
That's pretty awful.
The performance says that to me entirely. It's a great performance from everybody.
Yeah. For sure. Sam Lowry is, what did he go on to be in? Because I recognize him, but I don't know if
He's the High Sparrow in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Jonathan
Or
Pryce.
like that's what I recognize him.
Jonathan Pryce has been in a lot of stuff. He was also the villain in Tomorrow Never Dies. He's one of the popes in the new Pope.
All right.
All right.
He's been in a lot of shit. He was in G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra,
Jesus,
as the U.S. president.
As the president of these United States.
He was the father of, he was Governor Witherby Swan in The Curse of the Black Pearl, Pirates of the Caribbean.
All right, we can
as
stop.
Elizabeth Swan.
Oh, wait, I remember him from that. Yeah,
Yes,
he's
I
Elizabeth's
remember
dad.
that, yeah.
He's also a very renowned
Shut up,
theater actor. He was in Glengarry Glen Ross. That's another thing you might know.
Yes.
He's in a lot of
That's
shit,
actually the main one. That's the image that's in my head that I was trying to.
No,
watch.
it's surprising to me
He's
that
great.
you don't recognize that name. He is all over the place. He's just British, so sometimes it doesn't translate all the time. But he's been in tons of movies and a lot.
I didn't
of
know
TV.
Michael Gambon, and I felt really bad. Like in
that's
retrospect, I should know his name.
Yeah, I remember
clearly.
because I told you I was like, he's like, that's Dumbledore.
Dumbledore was wiping dog shit into a guy's mouth. Really?
Tim Roth. Yeah, Jonathan Pryce is an absolute treasure. Absolute treasure.
Yeah, speaking of beloved British actors, Ian Holm, the Hobbit himself, Bilbo.
Yeah.
Bilbo.
Yeah, he comes
That's
to
right.
life. He comes to life in Sam Lowry's dream and tries to hold him with big, strong stone hands, which I consider a never-ending story reference.
That is true.
Yeah.
It's a shot taken from a Chris Marker painting, like basically just a documentary about the French library. That then he did that shot, and then a bunch of other people did that shot, and it's just now it's kind of like the Wilhelm Scream with visual shots, if that makes sense.
Which is what you're talking about, is latching the
camera
camera to an object
Hudsucker,
and follow the life of the object.
Follow the life of the object, and it's usually a book or a pamphlet in a cart. And you go down the start. Yeah, everyone's seen the shot. It's been in a bunch of music videos. It's like a deal. Is all I'm saying.
It's a good shot.
And when you say you see it
yes,
next
it
time,
does-
you
it
go,
does.
you know, that's from a reference to an obscure 1960s film.
Yeah,
And then
say
everyone
that.
will be like, "Get out of my house."
The next time you're watching a commercial for
say
Ralph's,
that.
be like, oh, the shot of the cart, that's from
The guy who made La Jetée.
Legité.
La Jetée. But yeah, Brazil, the amount of visual, lexicon that's going on here is insane in terms of like how we developed it. It's not just steampunk. It's also like it's not just how we do bureaucracy, but it's also how we do like claustrophobia. It's there's a lot to be said about, like, I know one Clockwork Orange came out before this, and all hail Kubrick, but like it's still the same kind, like torture is done, I think, differently after this movie. I can't really bring up all the examples now, but like there's just a lot of iconography that comes from
it's
this
super
film.
seminal. Like, just think of Jill as Furiosa and him as Mad Max, and you're like,
Yeah, I was
it's
gonna
like
bring that up.
40. It's not
Got
100.
super Mad Max Fury Road
Super
vibes.
Mad Max Fury
yeah,
Road
that.
vibes in Act 3 specifically. It's like they took that act
Yes.
and made it a whole movie instead. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the movie's
And
awesome.
of course, because I work at IGN now and I'm completely steeped in video game shit all the time, 24/7. I recently read a Kotaku piece that was very insightful, I thought, about why Outer Worlds is a workable satire, which was specifically because the whole game you're waiting to get to the planet where all the rich people live, who are at the top of this society, and then you get there and you realize it's also broken and shitty, and only the marketing makes it seem good. And I love things, and I'm like, that owes to Brazil. That's Brazil too. Brazil has one of my
we're all in this together.
Oh my God, that's my favorite line, because specifically that's when Robert De Niro drowns Bob Hoskins in shit, which is reason enough to see this movie if you haven't seen it.
Right.
But is that sentence? But specifically, their suits fill up with shit, and Sam Lowry says shit, and he says, "We're all in it together, kid." And that is the thesis of the film. We're all drowning in shit. We may as well help each other. Yeah. Yeah, but
Yes.
anyway, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, go
Also,
ahead.
he's not actually. I mean, he's. We're all in this together, but he's still hurting the other people. Like Hoskins and his guy.
Well, did you think they died?
Not coming
I
out on
wondered
top.
that. Do they die? Do they?
I think they probably got out of those
Okay,
suits.
because the shit explodes
I like
onto
to
the
think
window.
that there's a tool that they could cut.
Yeah, I think De
explodes
Niro's
or
character
something.
also isn't. I don't think he's really associated with violence. Like obviously,
Right.
in the dream sequence, he's viewed as one of the terrorists, but he's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think he's actually. I don't think he would have killed. Those
Oh, good.
people.
That makes me happy. But in terms of like the seminalness of this film, I just wanted to highlight the planned payoff of consciously showing them fleeing town in her giant truck, and you realize beat one, oh, the highways in this world are just endless billboards on either side of you, so tall that you can't see over them, and they show pretty nature imagery. And the restraint in waiting like 20 minutes until they've done their business and are coming back to show the same shot, but then crane up and reveal that outside those two borders of billboards, the earth is a radiated wasteland. And like that's literally the only reference in the entire movie that the world is an irradiated wasteland. The crazy restraint of just showing one hint that the world is an irradiated wasteland is so cool to me.
The working title for this movie, until unfortunately 1984 was made by a different filmmaker, and much to the chagrin of Terry Gilliam, the working title of it was 1984 and a half, which is, yes, a combination of 1984,
And
which this seems
8 and a half.
and then 8.5, which is the Fellini film, which is so the idea. Not a lot of people know about 8.5. 8.5. The idea behind it is it's his eighth movie. So this makes it's like he's saying, this is me talking about making a movie while I'm making a movie. And that sounds really terrible, like hard to watch. But
Yeah,
what it deals with is it's because the theme of the movie, in the same way that in Brazil, the theme of the movie is very much the 1984 in society and all that. And the reason that it's like a midlife crisis film.
It's really good.
8.5 is
8.5 is
a
great.
creative process. It's talking about how in personal life and in like his own like career as a filmmaker, him looking at all the problems that are in society and all the problems that face him in order to make a good film, and how like it turns him into he just doesn't know what to deal with it, and he like freaks out essentially. So it's talking about the difficulty of life, and it's talking about happiness and how you navigate that space. 1984 is about it's more of a social, like top-down methodology of like this is what society can become. So it makes a lot of sense to me that this would be 19.5, or this would be 1984 and 8.5.
It sounds silly,
it's a synthesis between the
but
two
it's a
films.
way better title than Brazil. The title Brazil
It's a
hurts
way
it.
better.
Yeah.
Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in a nutshell, 1984 is one of the more timely books that you could possibly read in the year of our Lord 2020, because the basic discovery of 1984 was like Orwell saying, no, I know your brain works. I know you're smart. Humans can be completely brainwashed into the point of thinking black is white and up is down and just become the tools of a propagandistic cult that spreads misinformation. Yes, they can. They absolutely can. And I'm like,
Right, as if we're not products of society.
yeah, it was like 1984 is basically just saying like, oh, no, yeah, Fox News will happen. Oh, you think it won't work? No, it'll work. And God, he wasn't wrong. Not wrong. I didn't know that. That's amazing that it was going to be called 1984 and a half. That's actually a really good title for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is better than
It
Brazil.
is better than Brazil, although the song called Brazil that they play is a great song. I don't know.
And it plays to like his, his escapism and his fantasies.
Yeah.
And, Like the only actual vacation you can take from this world is in your brain.
Yeah,
Until
I
they
think
take that away from you too.
there's also overlap with The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, because daydreaming obviously is a big part of the movie, but also the fact that you realize Jill is the capable one who see things correctly. He wants to be, but he's not even really there yet. You know?
No, he's still figuring it out. Do you think? So speaking of Jill, do you think that she is real?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think the main thing I realized, I watched it twice since we decided to cover it. And the first time I had a point where I thought the dream started, because spoiler alert, and again, I will say pause it and watch the movie if you haven't seen it. Welcome back. Spoiler alert, in the correct version, like the whole third act is a dream, because he dreams that through the sheer will of one person who just became woke, society will just go, "Oh, you're woke now? We'll fix ourselves." Like, we'll sort our shit out.
We got it now. Yeah.
And it's the realization that no, man, no, like it's gonna take more than that.
I mean, good for you, but ooh, yeah.
And on the ground, the plot is that it's a daydream he was having while being tortured. So in my first watching, I picked one point that I thought everything after that was a dream. And it's the point at which Robert De Niro and the terrorists burst in and save him. And then when I watched it again, I had the question, is everything a dream from the point at which he gets knocked out in the paddy wagon by the two guys who say,
I think so, yeah.
"Sorry, sir, but I have to knock you out now. You're not allowed to fuck with the burlap sacks." Sweat.
I think so. Yeah.
Everything
I think
after that is a dream, right? Everything.
That's my argument. I think it.
That's even worse. That's super depressing.
Yeah. I think the ambiguity of it is the thing, though. I think he's not actually like if you go up to Terry Gilliam, he's gonna go like, "I'll never tell."
Right.
And I think that artists are afforded that right.
But that would mean that my take of the Palin sequence, where it's like, oh, deep down, he does care about friendship. Someone could come back and say, well, that was the dream of what.
That's his wishful thinking.
Yeah, Sam Lowry hopes.
Which is like even fucking sadder, because like the bare minimum is that he still does it.
Like,
he still tortures him, but he has like a moment.
It's this thought of if Abe has to torture me, I hope he feels bad about it.
Right.
Why can't it be that we're jumping in and out of the dream and reality?
Oh, that's true too.
And,
I think that's
just that sequence where the tortures are happening. Except for like the breakout and stuff like that, obviously.
Well, then you've convinced me that the end is open to interpretation. Period.
It just has to be. I think that
so much of it is. So I mean, even like there's that one sequence where they're at like a jewelry store, I think, like they're getting a gift.
Yeah.
And then he gets in a tussle with Jill, and there's that sequence where like he's kind of fighting with the mirror. So like Jill's behind the mirror, but you see split down the middle of the screen. One side is Sam, and the other side is also Sam.
Yeah.
Right, nice pickup, yeah.
But, that doesn't mean that she's not real. Just, it's trying to say something about them as characters.
Oh,
but yeah, open to interpretation.
There's so much. Jim,
it's
this
a lot.
Is
yeah,
arguably my favorite Jim Broadbent performance of all time.
Oh, chilling.
Oh, he's so good at this. Oh, everything with the face stuff is so. Oh my god.
And I'm glad that we can't possibly explain this movie to like a point of understandingness to people who haven't seen it. Just go watch it. But like, all the face stuff.
All the face
it's
stuff.
So
with
disturbing
his mom,
and dead on right. It's so good.
Ida. And
she
like
apparently
that.
got like really
pills,
bad hives
we never talked
filming
about
it.
The pills that they eat.
Oh right, the pills. Yeah, the little goop
the goop
with the pictures of what the food is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Which I know is like, I mean that's pretty Andy Warhol-esque like level, but like it's also it's just funny
when you
the
realize
way it's
that's
it's
a little detail,
that's the same scene that includes us learning that he
terrorism
has this
stuff.
dynamic with his mother. The terrorism stuff is normalized. The restaurant uses screens. Oh, they don't even have real food. It's dense in a way that, like, again, it just lifts it. Any movie that would be in my top 5 is hitting on every level. And I just can't stress enough how it's like, it's a dizzying amount of information from high level like philosophical satire that's very cerebral to the emotional grounding of the characters' relationships. It's all unfolding at once with symbols that can bank multiple things at once. It's so fucking good. Like the fact that his
so
mom
impressive.
is constantly getting plastic surgery and yet looks uglier and uglier until she suddenly looks gorgeous is both
Until she looks like his
Yes.
girlfriend.
it's both cerebral satire and a perfectly visceral metaphor of their emotional dynamic. Like that stuff just wows me. I can't imagine that I just love Brazil.
It's also got the whole section about, in that scene, it has a section about he's coming to terms with the fact that he doesn't want to, like, it's an arranged marriage, so to speak.
Oh my God.
Like, which in Western culture, we don't have a lot of movies that talk about that because it's still kind of, we consider ourselves a little bit more advanced or whatever.
Well,
I
we
guess,
care
than
more
Eastern
about
cultures.
quote unquote true love or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a bunch of bullshit because we do the same thing when the expectation is that in order for you to have a job at a high level, you have to have like a husband or a wife or to show that someone will live with you or whatever it is. And it's like, it's still the same kind of like servitude to the society, I guess is a way of saying it.
It is.
It's just less out in the open. It's still, just because it's behind the scenes doesn't mean that it doesn't have power over you. And it's just all these things vying for power, and when you opt into the system, and he's like, obviously the conflict is that he opts out of the system. He doesn't do it on his terms, but he eventually gets opted out for him.
Or in his dreams he does, whichever you want to roll with. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, whichever. Yeah.
Or a little bit of both. who
Well,
knows?
and
But
I think
yeah.
it's very intentional that from Jill's perspective, it really is the energy of like someone who just became woke, but they don't understand all the nuances yet. From her perspective, he's like a creepy rapist suit guy. Like he says, the first thing he says to her is, I know you because I dream about you and I'm in love with you. Well, I'm not in love with you, but I'm in love with you in the dreams. And she goes, okay. And she kicks him out of her cab, physically kicks him to the street. He jumps on her hood and writes, I love you in the dirt on the windshield. Like, after that point, there's no way to, you know what I mean? That would be like being accosted by a mentally ill person at the mall.
Yeah, you don't come back from that.
So
Like-
his vision of them as being meant to be, I think, is endlessly interesting to meditate on because they're not meant to be. And like the moment that he convinces her that he is her savior and she should sleep with him, she gets shot in the face. That's the end of her life.
Yep.
Like,
That's
why
the end.
he did nothing but sow horror in the life of a person who is already oppressed by the system and then become a victim of the system himself. It was like for the privilege of a little adventure where he pretended to be revolutionary, he ruined her life too. And that I hate interpreting it that way because that makes me ask very serious questions like, is that what I do? You know what I mean? It's just one of the best movies.
That's a very good movie.
It's highly, very effective.
Very funny
very
too, which
effective
we
sit-
barely touched
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Well, because like we were talking about earlier, like everything that's really funny, it's more interesting to talk about what it means because it all means something. Every single joke has a long conversation behind it.
Yeah.
So,
but
you know, what's the point?
But for the
Yeah.
record, the jokes land in the moment when you're watching them. Like
Absolutely, it's
Abe,
very
you
funny.
brought up the arranged marriage, which led to this whole long tangent, and yet that moment is super funny. It's him saying, finally, like working up the courage to say, I know that our parents want us to get married, but I don't want to marry you. And she goes, that's okay. I don't like you either. And he's like
It's so good.
offended.
And then he's
And
yeah,
you're
and
like,
he's
whoa, you-
I thought I was the person.
but you didn't like
Who made the
her.
stand.
What the fuck is the
No.
problem? Yeah.
You're not the one making stands.
Yeah.
You're just coming to the
Yeah, I'm the
realization
one.
that
I'm
shit,
the
life
guy.
is shit. We all know.
Yeah, that was a total Arrested Development moment for me, or George
Yeah.
Michael moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I can't find. It's wonderful because he is kind of pathetic. You root for him, but he's so pathetic because every instance of him interacting with whether it's Bobby D or it's fucking it's Jill or it's like his arranged marriage situation or girlfriend, I guess. It's just like someone turning to him and going, "Welcome to the fucking moment," and he's just like,
"Oh yeah." It's an absolute microcosm of, and we deserve it, but also it's good to persevere. Of like white people becoming woke and then tweeting like, "Can you believe shit is so racist?" And black people going, "Rightly so." Yeah, we knew that. Yeah, we knew that.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a long time.
It's still good. It's good to wake up, but black people are right to go, "Yeah, we knew that already, but welcome to the thing." And I think Brazil hits a note that's very important to hit as well, because it's so easy to root for Sam, and yet the movie goes out of its way to be like, "I know you root for Sam. You kind of are Sam." Is that
right?
good?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you feel about being the Sam?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a daring thing to. I mean, I expect it from Terry Gilliam at this point, but.
1985, the year of my birth.
1 year after. Oh, imagine if it came out.
Same.
6 months into the year 1985. That would have been perfect. Cody, have you seen Baron Munchausen? I hope we cover that sometime.
It's been a long time.
Very funny.
Like longer than it had been since I've seen Brazil.
It just, that one doesn't have, like, I would consider Brazil like Get Out. I would consider, like, this viewing made me really realize Get Out is an accomplishment on the order of Brazil. But like
definitely on the radio.
Baron Munchausen's not trying to be that. It's not satirical at all. It just proves that
it's like Time Bandits.
Yeah. I have a weird thing with Gilliam where I guess I really do wish. I understand he's an asshole and that bothers me, but I do wish that he had and he misgenders people, which is absolutely not fucking okay. But like Lynch, he has slammed together film images that I see and I go, "Damn, I like that. I wish more of that."
Yeah, it's what you want out of movies.
His version of magical realism just fucking, I love it. I'm addicted to it. In the way where Lynch can have in Twin Peaks, the guy put a dead deer head on a table, and I'm like, why does that creep me out so much? Who is this madman who thought of doing this?
Yeah. Get out. Get it. What are you doing? But also just make movies.
You're right. Get Out hits all the same cylinders on the writing level, but it's not trying to do the imagery thing.
It's not as dense.
It's not as magical realism images.
It's not as painted in.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, not a series of artistic images.
Right. He does some
that never end until the movie is over.
He does some good editing stuff, but yeah. Anyway,
but you know what I mean,
we'll
where
Get Out at
the ideas are unpackable to the point where you're like, I can't believe I'm still unpacking this image. Holy shit, this is well thought out.
Yeah. I mean, the even like little things like the computers and the magnifying glass screens, and like every single person is just watching like old movies and TV shows on it.
Oh my god, yeah, that everyone's screen requires using a magnifying glass. It's just so great.
So good.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's nothing that an hour-long podcast did.
That's what I'm. Yeah, this is the level of a Coen Brothers film, which is something I don't say lightly. Like, we could have done a 4-hour episode on this, but we're not going to because this is frame rate. So apologies. You know.
So go out and watch it.
But
but just go watch it and like watch it a second time. And it's so good.
It deserves you to think about every single shot in order, because every single shot has something to bring to the table.
Yes.
Cody, what's your favorite sequence or segment? Because you said you talked about themes and stuff, but is there one that like really got you into it?
I mean, the very beginning really got me into it. Like instantly here. I mean, that's easy to say because that's what you want from a movie.
Right.
But like just so many things in a row, the bug in the system, it being a feature, all like the politician talking on screen about the terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
The way it was talked about was instantly familiar and disgusting.
And the fact that you knew it came out in
35 years, dude.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, exactly. Just like that first, like the first 4 minutes, I guess, was just like, oh god, they're nailing it already. It's so good. And obviously it's like about, it's about these attacks that we're not experiencing, but it's the same mindset and the same language. It's the same way they talk about it. It gets you right away. And just we already talked about it, but the fighting over the desk through the room is just like, oh
it's one of the
god,
highlights, yeah.
Yeah,
so good.
It's really funny. That scene, I love the Jim Broadbent stuff. I also love how Michael Palin just has his kids.
I was gonna say they actually reshot that scene. They didn't, because it was just a normal scene between them. And after the movie was, I think, in the can, they were like, "This isn't working. We need to reshoot it." And they added the kid.
Brilliant.
And it just like it sells everything.
It's
about
bring
it.
your
It's so
daughter
good.
to work day at the torture factory. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think I believe that was Gilliam's kid.
Nice.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Bring your kid to work day.
Oh, and when Sam went to I guess Buttles.
Oh, I was
wife.
gonna say, can I go? And this was gonna be my moment, but you tell
Oh,
it. No,
then go ahead. There
I've
you
been
go.
on
No,
the
no, no.
mic. You tell it. You tell it.
Oh, I just love it. It's one of the first instances of him like waking up to his role and what's going on. And he has to tell this woman that due to like a clerical error, her husband's fucking dead. And paperwork is involved, and he doesn't know what to say to her. It's a sequence of lines where like she keeps asking what happened, and he keeps like avoiding eye contact, looking away. He's trying to leave the room so much.
He's watching the TV
just,
that is on mandatorily.
Watching the old shows that everyone watches. Because in this society you can't create anything new. Because that would be subverting the system. And it's just so good.
Yeah, the moment that gets me is it's just the sheer like frozenness of it. Like this could be a painting. In this moment, the symbol is perfected. It doesn't even need time to make it function. He's standing awkwardly, like putting his hand on her coffee table and looking at her TV, and she is crying, clutching her children to her breast and screaming, "What have you done with his body?" And he says, annoyed, "I didn't have to come here." And I'm like,
yes. Oh, that's the one.
I'm like, that's everything. That is the whole movie.
And then later, I love it's like, here's the receipt
for the refund.
Every receipt
because we
so
admit
good.
The government killed your husband by accident. Here's $27 or whatever.
Yeah. Because you out of your, even though we did the damage, you have to pay for all the damage that we did.
Right, but in this case, since we killed him by accident, you get your payment for damages returned to you. Aren't we a just society? Aren't we doing a good job?
Net gain,
Yeah, your refund is a net gain.
Yeah.
And like when
dead life,
the stormtroopers saw a hole in his ceiling to get him, so then later other stormtroopers come to fill the hole with a pre-packaged hole, like a floor hole that is designed for this purpose. And she's like, "That's not Tuttle." And they're like, "Of course it is. The government doesn't make mistakes." And they immediately drop the hole through the hole and it crashes.
It's the hole through the hole. It's the best. Yeah, that whole just
a lot of holes. A lot of people speaking through holes to each other.
Yeah,
holes and pipes and tubes, which I have to believe is intentional. Yeah.
Well, you know that in Gilliam, like it was true up to a point. In every film that Gilliam made, there was a very pronounced visual of cages and people in cages.
Yeah, and in this, there's a lot of slaves imagery. The working people are slaves,
and
etc.
we put people behind bars in this, or like a porthole is the equivalent.
Yeah.
You can't get out, but you can.
And portholes,
see.
little tiny rooms.
Yeah, exactly. So this one's less of the prison and more of like the mental institute, but it's very
Right.
much still, I think, Gilliam's bag. I think that's might still be true because I think it's a thing that he's aware of and he like tries to go for.
Also,
but I haven't seen Tideland, so
I haven't seen the Zero Theorem. I guess is that
I
the
haven't
one?
seen that, and I really
I have
need
not seen.
to.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Zero
that.
because I like
Theorem's pretty-
Waltz.
That's
it isn't- yeah.
Yeah, I like Waltz, and also it's presented as like part 3 in this basic
In
like
this
trilogy,
magical
this
realism
Brazil sort of
trilogy.
thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Trilogy
yeah.
of Imagination.
I'll have to check it
yeah.
out.
It's number 2, I think, in that. Well, Brazil is Trilogy of
Yes,
Imagination,
yeah, yeah.
which is like the Cornetto trilogy for like Edgar Wright.
Right.
Is Time Bandits, which is 81, and then Brazil 85, and then Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which was 88, and then he had another one, which is I think the one
Zero
that you're talking
Theorem
about.
with
Okay,
Christoph
yeah.
Zero
Waltz. Yeah.
Theorem and Parnassus.
Parnassus, I didn't care for. It's like it's
didn't
interesting.
care
It's
for
like a hollow version of Brazil. It's like all the same tricks
Mhm.
with no meaning, and I'm just gonna be grateful Brazil exists. And stop.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
We should all be grateful
we
that Brazil
should, and we
exists.
should
Yeah.
watch it.
Yeah, we should watch it again. You're right.
Mm.
I'm not kidding. Actually, we should watch it.
We should watch it and just talk over it every time we see
yeah,
something,
'cause-
point it out and go, "Oh, look!"
It's
Again, I'm not joking. It's so good. We could do that and say something new every moment that we have not said
absolutely
on this podcast.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I have the DVD. I have the Criterion, so we can do that.
Let's do it. We're gonna do it on Rabbit. Oh, it's so good.
Oh God, that would be.
Yeah, we should make those gainfully unemployed motherfuckers watch it with us some Friday night.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell
All
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
We're all friends and we watch movies and talk about
Great.
it.
Yeah, we are and we
Let's
do.
come join
Let's
us.
leave them on that note
Yeah.
so it can sustain in their brains and their chosen version of reality can seem to be true.
Mhm.
I want to thank
We're all victims to the.
I want to
ducks.
thank Shannon
All right.
and Jesse again for giving us
Yeah.
a chance to talk about this truly profound and important film
Mm.
together.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
I
thank
hope
you.
This was, a good gift
Happy
for Christmas.
Birthday
Very
or
late.
Christmas or marriage or whatever.
Happy holiday.
2 months. Two months.
Oh,
late,
oh,
you know?
yeah, and I forgot. Shannon wanted us to say, even though all systems are hollow inside and everything is bullshit propaganda, you guys are really soulmates, and that's true.
That's
So that's
true.
good.
That is true. That's true. It's
Good.
good.
Hold on
So
to that.
happy. Hold on to that.
You're the only ones.
You're the only ones. Cody, is there anything you want to pitch, a project of yours or someone else's that you're interested in?
like go watch this thing or
Like
go
plugs.
watch my stuff.
Like,
Yeah, I mean,
whatever you
I do stuff on the internet. If you Google some more news and like Twitter and like YouTube, we do news shows about kind of a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. Through the
Googling
lens
Twitter and
of
it's not
dang. Some more news. I'm Dr. Mr. Cody on Twitter. We have a podcast called Even More News, and I also do another podcast called Worst Year Ever that you can check out on iHeartRadio. It's got it's about politics as well and our society and all the problems with jokes. And we have a Patreon as well if you'd like to check that out for some more
Dr.
news.
Mr. Cody is DRMISTER Cody.
Thank you. I always
Yeah.
spell it whenever I plug my thing, and I
Although
always feel like a real piece of
agree
shit.
with the general sentiment that I think Billy Wayne Davis expressed on Zeitgeist recently. Shouldn't we be through this phase where we're in the phase where everyone knows plugging is just, oh, you got to plug at the end, right? And you say all your pluggables. What
Yeah.
is this lie we're all living? Can't you just say, Google my name, motherfucker? It comes up on Google. Like, if you have any concern of note, Google the title of it. and
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
be
yeah,
there. It's fine.
Yeah.
I've done that a few times. It's so much easier and makes so much more sense. I hate
I'm
listing
Cody
all
Johnston.
my things.
You can take it from there
it's like,
because of the internet.
Like for real, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very easy.
Just copy
it's probably how
paste.
you found out about what you're listening to right now. So
Right. Yeah. It's because I guess we're outsourcing our own plugs now. But I mean, I understand. I understand. He said that on our podcast, and I was like, that is the greatest plug I've
that
ever
was
heard
on
in my
ours.
life.
Okay, that's when Billy Wayne said that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on a frame rate. Yeah. But thank you for that, man. Thank you for being here. I know it took a while for us to get you here, and that's no fault of yours.
Oh yeah!
I'm so
Thanks
excited.
for having me.
We should have you more, because you're.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like talking about movies with my friends.
And the one, I love
and this movie especially too. I mean, like you said, it took us a while to sort of coordinate this, but I've had separate conversations with both Abe and Michael leading up to this, where we tried really hard to not talk about the movie because we really, really wanted to.
We were like playing Rocket League, and then you're like,
It's like,
it's
I
like
really
you were,
want to
oh
talk.
shit.
Yeah.
I
No.
want to talk about the thing. Like the Iowa caucus happened. I'm like, you want to the movie? Never mind.
If we're still doing it frame rate in 2 years, we should just do Brazil again with the same.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
just like, all right, listen to just listen to it. Let's talk about other stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
That I believe is everything that we can
I
do
agree.
in this time allotment. Thanks again,
Yeah.
Shannon. Thanks again, Cody. Mike, you're all right.
Jesse, you didn't contribute as directly, so goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Yikers.